The friend that was lost, that called yesterday to talk to our prime minister. Where was he?
Ambassador, are you concerned that history will repeat itself?
What the Biden administration should do.
And the Biden administration has this message to the world. Don't go too close to China.
We don't put all our eggs in one basket.
The demonstrators in the diaspora were not all Ethiopian.
It is Ethiopia today, it will be them tomorrow.
Western Tigray.
We call them Northern Amhara.
Vowed to depose a democratically elected government.
Where would they have stopped? Because when Hitler got crazy, he didn't stop at the borders of France.
They didn't seem to have any concern at all. And why is that?
Make the people of the United States understand that Ethiopia means friendship, that Ethiopia means business with the United States.
I'm Johannes Lichalo. It all began in 1903, a year Ethiopia and the United States officially established diplomatic ties. Emperor Minilik II of Ethiopia and Mr. Robert Skinner, representative of the United States government, signed agreements to strengthen commerce and bilateral relationships. This year marks 119th year of that historical occasion. But at this moment, the relationship is in big trouble. United States already sanctioned Ethiopia and suspended it from the duty-free trade program known as AGWA. This all happened in the backdrop of a war that is going on in northern Ethiopia. Of course, this country has no choice but to defend its people from the total war waged by the TPLF. Recently, the Biden administration replaced its special envoy for the Horn of Africa, Jeffrey Feltman, with another diplomat. The big question is, changing diplomats or changing policy, which we can save this long-standing relationship for now and for years to come. To shed light on this issue, my guest today is Ethiopia's former ambassador, Tafara Shao.
Ambassador, how come United States, a country which is perceived as a symbol of freedom, democracy, and justice, to have a special kind of relationship with a party like TPLF, which has committed atrocities which amounted to war crimes, crimes against humanity, even worse than that?
Well, let's take you back to the time when the relationships with the TPLF started, and why America was aligned to TPLF, or rather a party in America, the Democratic Party of the United States, and some of the hardcore friends of TPLF who have been fighting, or rather waging war against the military government in the past. They were with the TPLF on the ground, in the field, and these are 1, 2, 3, or 4 people who are now very close to the Biden administration and who are advising that administration. Apparently, these people have been beneficiaries of the very close ties they had established with the TPLF. In the advent of the change in Ethiopia, there came a leader or a leadership that said, okay, the past has been an era when the country was looted naked. The leadership in power has been looting the country, has been enriching itself as a party or as individuals, and therefore let them go wherever they want with what they have looted, but we want peace. We want to establish better relations with our people, with the international community.
The very starting point of all this conflict just goes to November 3. But the US State Department 2020 Human Rights Report whitewashed 2 important factors. One, Who started the conflict? Number two, with what intention? And the State Department report deliberately missed these two important factors. The question is, why?
If you have decided to condemn a person that you have convicted, or rather imprisoned, if you have decided to convict him to death, to judge him to death, then there is no occasion for a due process of law. So the United States, right from the start, under Biden administration, has made up its mind to condemn Ethiopia, to condemn the Ethiopian government, no matter whether it is saintly or devil. But you see, when relations between states, as I said, are predicated by personal relationships, then the whole picture is lost. Relations started on a wider scale, from the Korean War to the Al-Shabaab war, to common development, to common efforts in the UN, to peace and security in the world. In all this, Ethiopia has been a partner for the United States. If we can say the genesis started on November 3, it is just not a correct perspective of history. It started earlier, the day they lost power, the day they established that the Ethiopian people have finally unchained themselves from a dictatorial relationship with our brothers in the north. That triggered the whole fight. Yes, there have been many achievements during the reign of EPRDF. We cannot deny that. We cannot whitewash that. Infrastructures have been built. Relations have been developed very well, particularly with the West, European Union, and the United States. But again, the individual relationships that were nesting in this historical process, particularly from Biden administration's hardcore to some like Borrell in the European Union, have been licking their wounds because their friends have lost power. They couldn't accept democracy in Ethiopia, a peaceful change in Ethiopia, when they accept it in their own country. So this is a double standard.
The US State Department of 2020 Human Rights Report denied the fact that the November 9 massacre that was happened in Maikada, the victims were non-Tigrayan seasonal laborers. This was how the State Department 2020 Human Rights Report characterized the victims of Maikada massacre. In fact, the victims were largely Amharas.
Proven that massacre was not targeted, I would be perhaps satisfied that it was a casualty of war. But they singled out a certain ethnic group that had settled there for centuries, started their farms, started their livelihood, and then all of a sudden, in order to incorporate that area, they drew their own map. They have it rushed through parliament in those days, and then Wolkait and Tagade was incorporated in Tigray. Now, if the Ethiopian people, through a referendum, say, yes, let them go to Tigray, that's another issue. But it is not a fact that in the pre-Derg era, Wolkait Tagade was never part of Tigray. Witness the Jazmash Ras Mangasha Siju. It was not part of Tigray. So this can be even then discussed on the table, not through the force of arms. So why should they? Of course, the whole idea was to open a corridor via Sudan, have an access to the sea, proclaim an independent state like Bosnia or like Kosovo, and then they want to be like Kosovo in Europe. You know, when Yugoslavia disintegrated, Kosovo is still a state that is recognized only by the West, but it's not. It's a fake state. So do they want to set up a fake state? No.
State Department characterized Wolkait and Humara as Western Tigray and denied the victims of November 9 massacre were Amharas.
The State Department is hoodwinked by a few individuals within the Democratic Party that are beholden to TPLF through favor or through, I can't say it is through love of Tigray, but beholden through favors they received from TPLF. So if they call Walqait Tagade Western Tigray, we call them Northern Amhara. As simple as that. You know, the map that they have redrawn should be negated by parliament if it has to be done. They redrew the map after, you remember, after they came to Ethiopia. Maybe they have been drawing the map while they were still fighting against the Derg. And that map has to be redrawn. Any redrawing of a map has to be by the sanction of the people, by referendum, by the people that inhabit that area. Why did Ethiopia allow Eritrea to be independent? It was a referendum, okay? Have these people been given the chance to hold a referendum, to stay whether they are with Tigray or whether with Gondar or whether with the Sudan or whether with the Ethiopia, with the Eritrea? Nobody has given them the right to choose. Now, if the TPLF begins an argument on this issue, that can also be discussed on the table. This is, instead of going to war, war destroys countries, destroys people. I think destruction is something that they enjoy, because what we saw that happened in Waldia, in Dessie, in the Afar region, is replete with destructive activities. And the human soul, the human life is so important. Unless a government or a leadership or a party recognizes that the human life is sacred, that human life should be protected, then they have no right even to speak on behalf of the people of Tigray. If they kill Amhara children or Tigray children, or if they let children of Tigray starve by blocking access to the humanitarian agencies, now they spin, they say, oh, humanitarian access has been blocked. No, it has not been blocked. They blocked it. They retained all over 1,000 lorries that had been carrying assistance to the Tigray region. If they were indeed humanitarian, if they really wanted humanitarian services, they should have sent back the trucks so that they could carry for them more humanitarian assistance. That has not happened. The whole thing was simply a fascistic, expansionist drive that if they would not stop at Debrecen, they wouldn't have stopped at Debrecen, I tell you. If you let them come in, you can imagine what kind of destructions they will bring on Addis Ababa, on the south, on everywhere. And then they will say, oh, it doesn't matter, we will rebuild it. No. You see, this has been a very destructive war. Nobody wants it.
Ambassador, do you believe the U.S. selective concern in Tigray region and its abysmal disregard of atrocities outside of Tigray has emboldened the TPLF to continue its rampage of killing in Afar and Amhara regions?
The fact that the Ethiopian government gave them time to think and withdrew its forces from Tigray, they took it as a defeat, which is not. Patience was called for. The Ethiopian forces were restrained, and when they were restrained, they thought they got an easy ride into Northern Shoa and Amhara region and Afar region. Where would they have stopped? Because when Hitler got crazy, he didn't stop at the borders of France. He attacked Britain and he attacked, Leningrad, Moscow, and every other place, because then the expansionist psyche or frenzy attacked, or rather overtook him. I think it is a repeat of history, albeit in Africa.
But I'm afraid, Ambassador, Western diplomats and State Department didn't see the situation that way. And it didn't even define the conflict as between the TPLF hardcore and the government of Ethiopia. They believe that.
Believe me, they don't. They know that TPLF is wrong. They know that TPLF has attacked. They know that TPLF has destroyed, and they have even begrudgingly started to chip in some humanitarian assistance for Amhara and Afar regions. They know it. They know deep in their heart. But the intelligence agencies of the United States have changed the minds and brains of the Western leadership, West Europeans and others, to sing the song that was prescribed to them by the United States administration's hardcore democratic persons that have been nested or that are nested in the Biden administration.
So you are telling me in one of the world's most powerful country, individual connection is winning over policy and values.
That's right. The Biden administration is simply a prisoner of crooks, I should say. It's a prisoner of crooks. And these crooks have been trying to mislead the Biden administration, or administration itself maybe believed in it, but in the face of naked truth, they continue to whitewash whatever happens by way of destruction, by way of attack on Ethiopia.
Why is that?
Well, politics, politics is sometimes the art of the impossible. And it's this now, this attitude of the United States is something that you cannot imagine, that in the face of historical truth, is in the face of, there isn't even a balance, there isn't even an effort to balance the stories that they put out. Well, I should admit, on the part of Ethiopia, we have not been clever in presenting our case to the world. We present our case very beautifully to our people. That's good. That has mobilized the people. You see how the diaspora has reacted, how the diaspora has stood firmly behind their motherland. But in order to convince the Western countries, first, the diplomatic efforts that have been waged so far, good as they are not enough. A very good effort has been made. This government has not looted billions of dollars from its own pocket. TPLF has, and they pay the lobby groups, they pay the media. CNN has been drawing 300,000+ US dollars a week for spot announcements to praise and glorify the TPLF. But what have we done? A few hardcore good people, good persons who know Ethiopia have been trying to speak the truth, to tell the truth to the world. But that's not enough. Our diaspora have been saying it. But the people in the Biden administration are not convinced that they should open up, that they should forget the past and start a new chapter. I hope the latest telephone call, despite the misrepresentation by BBC, is something that leads to a better understanding between the two countries.
People may have different opinions, but they can't afford to have different factors. And when it comes to factors, the TPLF has already made it clear that it is the one who started the war. And when we come to the Maikadra massacre, it is very obvious that Amharas were targeted because of their identity. The denial of all these factors, plus to that, the characterization of Wolkite and Humara as Western Tigray. The TPLF narrative perfectly aligned with State Department's interpretation of the issue.
This reminds me of George Orwell's rewriting of history, just providing alternative facts, as Trump called it once. When they tell the truth, it is the truth. But when they tell the falsehoods, it is alternative facts. So with their alternative facts, they are trying to mislead the world, to make the world believe that the TPLF is a saint, is a harmless kitten. No, the facts speak for themselves. As I said, in our communication to the rest of the world, for Ethiopia, we have done well. To the rest of the world, our communication to the rest of the world has a long way to go. We have to do better than what we have done so far. Our diplomats, with all the problems that exist, have done their best. But they're not supported by the billions of dollars that have been looted, which have gone to the TPLF's pockets. Now, if Ethiopian diplomacy was supported by resources, if Ethiopian diplomacy was supported by trained and able human resources, then things would change. The fact is, and it is clear, clearly admitted by the leadership of Ethiopia itself, that they are reforming the foreign policy, they are reforming the foreign administration, the foreign policy implementation. They are doing what a state can do under the circumstances. And thanks to the great effort by the armed forces of Ethiopia, by the militia, and by the people themselves, so far, TPLF has not succeeded in toppling the federal state.
The Biden administration from the onset has promised the world human rights will be just the cornerstone of its foreign policy.
Do you believe politicians when they say this? When a politician in the West says something, you have to see what is behind it.
The Biden administration has voiced its concerns whenever human rights abuses are reported in Tigray region. But apart from that, when Amharas are attacked because of their identity, when Afars are attacked, they didn't seem to have any concern at all. And why is that?
They had been hijacked. Their mind and thinking has been hijacked or buttered by the favor they dished out on some of the key people in the Biden administration. Therefore, they have kept their minds, their eyes blind. I remember when the EPRDF said at one stage it won 100% of the parliamentary seats. Susan Rice was laughing because it was ridiculous. No country in no place would win 100% of the votes of its people to bring someone to power. They know how ridiculous the Ethiopian people's administration was in the past. And because a new dispensation has come to change that kind of process, and because there is someone who says, now I want free and fair elections, they didn't even want to begin with. They didn't even want to observe the elections. Did they? They didn't. The European Union, of course, said, yes, sir, we also do not want to observe the elections. If they observe the elections, they would have been able to see for themselves. But the African Union and many other observers, international observers, have attested that this is a legitimate government. They didn't even want to consider legitimacy for the government. Did Biden call Dr. Abiy when he was elected prime minister in the latest election? No, he didn't. It's only now, after a long time, then they start to sort of smoothen the way to another kind of dispensation. It's a friend lost that called yesterday. I'm sorry. It's a friend that was lost that called yesterday to talk to our prime minister. You know, where was he? When the prime minister was elected, he didn't even give him the courtesy to congratulate him.
Back in August, the TPLF took control of Nefas China Amhara region, Gaint district. And for 9 days, its fighters have been controlling the town. And Amnesty International, in some extent, has documented the plight of civilians in that town. This is how Amnesty International Secretary General Agnes Kalamard related that story. The testimonies we heard from survivors describe despicable acts by TPLF fighters that amount to war crimes and potentially crimes against humanity. They defy morality or any iota of humanity. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Mass graves are found everywhere. The TPLF forces had entered into. The schools become burial sites. The deafening silence of the Biden administration to such atrocities defies the very essence of human rights. How damaging is this to an administration that boycotted the Winter Olympics that is due to held in China for human rights concerns?
Well, with regard to human rights reports, I remember when their agents, the BBC, was reporting on the human rights report that you just mentioned. They glossed over the atrocities and everything. Then they started to put the blame again on TPLF, on the federal forces. They have been bought, I'm sorry to use the word, they have been bought to speak falsehoods. That is why we are now victims. Ethiopia is a victim of propaganda aggression, false statements being spitted out by every official in the administration of Mr. President Biden. And the saving grace is there are still some people who believe that the Ethiopian government is not the only one to blame in this war.
There was an insurrection at the time President Biden wins the presidential election in 2020, and President Trump supporters stormed the Capitol Hill. That incident was taken seriously by the Biden administration when there is an insurrection in Ethiopia against the reform process in this country. Why are the Biden administration not blaming and not naming what it should name?
Not only as a matter of decency, but also as a matter of positive development and strengthening relations, the Biden administration should have heeded to the call of the Ethiopian diaspora. Why it was negatively disposed to Ethiopia, towards Ethiopia. You remember when Biden was elected, Ethiopian Americans in the United States voted overwhelmingly in favor of the Democratic Party, thinking that the future is bright under that administration. Now we have proven ourselves wrong in that instance, and the Biden administration has never made its intentions clear with regard to how to handle Ethiopia, because the TPLF has done a great job in terms of brainwashing some of the people through favors and through other means to always argue on its behalf. Their intellectuals, their dissidents, refugees there, they have managed to capture the minds of a certain people in the Biden administration. Have we done enough to counter that? No, we have not. So the why should be also to us, the why should be also to them. So we have to sit and think and see how to wage this kind of campaign on behalf of Ethiopia to make the people of the United States understand that Ethiopia means friendship, that Ethiopia means business with the United States, that Ethiopia means business with the rest of the world, that we need to restore the common ideals of world peace, collective security, and freedom and democracy.
We all have watched a leaked video as former Western diplomats, some of them active still, including an American diplomat, Donald Yamamoto, discussing about a transitional government scenario in Ethiopia.
I don't think Yamamoto or any of his colleagues are in a position or qualified to tell the Ethiopian people who their leaders should be. The Ethiopian people have made their statement already 2.5 years ago by electing a party and by electing a prime minister. Therefore, there is no need for a transitional government in Ethiopia now. There is a government in Ethiopia elected by the people. So if these people have a fertile imagination to create a cabinet or a government with some hotel guards and Uber taxi drivers and you name it, they can't do that. It's just a laughable thing. I mean, it's something that cannot be done.
A couple of months ago, U.S. hosted these organizations were designated as terrorist organizations by the House of People Representatives, and they publicly vowed to depose a democratically elected government by using force in the U.S. soil in a country that tells the world that democracy is the way forward.
This is criminal. This is not legal. This is not lawful. These people should be prosecuted for inciting violence, for encouraging armed insurrection. If the Biden administration has tried those who did the insurrection on January 6th last year on the Congress, they should equally take these people to court and tell them that this is criminal. They cannot do that against a friendly state or otherwise. They cannot do that against any other state sitting on an American soil and having the luxury of eating their McDonald's or whatever. So the double standard has transpired in this activity as well.
Back of Ethiopia, they chanted.
Hundreds of thousands of Ethiopians denounced the Biden administration policy on Ethiopia. Do you believe the No More movement could give President Biden a chance to reassess and to see the situation in Ethiopia in a much different light?
I think the fact that the president that never called us for the last 2.5 years has now made it a point to call our leader and talk to him has not come about easily. It has come as a pressure of the No More movement, thanks to Hermela, and it has come out as a pressure of the entire diaspora, thanks to the sons and daughters of Ethiopia. It comes also, most importantly, as a result of the strength of leadership of Dr. Abiy, the strength of leadership and the strength of the fighting spirit of the defense forces of Ethiopia. And that is it. It's not an easy thing that came about. It's not because they wanted to be kind all of a sudden. No, we have earned the respect of the world. We have earned the respect of the American people and administration. The administration may not be respecting Ethiopia to the extent that it is desired, but respect they have.
Protesters waving Ethiopian and Eritrean flags denouncing what they termed as Western bullying. The US has sanctioned Asmara for its role in the conflict in Ethiopia.
The demonstrators in the diaspora were not all Ethiopians. There were Eritreans, there were Somalians, and can we say that there is a kind of call-up for the Biden administration to rethink its strategy in a much wider perspective?
Yeah, well, you know why the people from other countries, neighborhood, and other African countries rose up? Because it is Ethiopia today, it will be them tomorrow. They are fighting through whatever intellectual power they have to tell the world that Africa can never stand anymore such approaches by the American administration. It could be Biden administration, it could be Trump administration, it could be anybody. But any outside interference cannot be tolerated by the peoples of Africa.
When we see the Horn of Africa, Eritrea, Somalia, and Ethiopia seems to have this new kind of partnership that was not observed just or imagined a decade ago. So,
well,
how can this partnership flourish? Because I'm suspicious that Western countries, particularly the United States, is not looking at this partnership in a good eyes or in a positive view.
You see, if you look at the Middle East, the United States always supported Egypt because Egyptians were smart in galvanizing the support of the Arab sheikhs, Arab countries. No matter what kind of dictatorship was in Egypt, the Americans would support them. And they do that as well now. Whatever happens now in this part of the world is because at long last in our history, the interaction between the peoples of the Horn of Africa has been good people's interaction. Governments may have had antagonistic relations from time to time. But now the new generation of leadership in the Horn of Africa has said, now let's look forward towards a better understanding, a better integrated, a better cooperative movement within this region. So now the American administration sees this as a not so welcome development, because then there is another big power that resists diktat of the American government.
Currently, a new powerhouse is coming into world politics or trying to lead world politics, China. And the Biden administration has this message to the world: don't go too close to China.
There is a power struggle for global dominance, economically as well as politically. This is evident. You remember when Emperor Haile Selassie visited the United States and the assistance was not that much forthcoming. Why did he go to Russia and got millions of dollars and assistance, concrete assistance for Ethiopia. He went to China, met Mao Zedong. He got $400 million from, at that time, impoverished China for the development of agriculture in Ethiopia. Why? Because we have an independent thinking, traditionally, that we don't put all our eggs in one basket. If you put all your trust on the American administration, then you are lost. You have to deal with the rest of the world because there are other countries who admire Ethiopian culture, who support Ethiopian independence, who want to cooperate with Ethiopia economically and otherwise. We have to give credit where it is due. The EPRDF, when it believed it was an Ethiopian state, an Ethiopian leadership, did its best to bring about the infrastructural development. The present stage is, you see, Ethiopia has a lot of natural resources in its reserve. The Chinese have, like the Russians, like the Americans, discovered oil, petroleum in eastern Ethiopia, in western Ethiopia. There are other very precious metals and minerals. All this is a reserve. So when the Chinese come in greater force, that spells not so great pleasure for America, for the West, because this is the Horn of Africa is now the battleground for economic and other cultural interactions. And when it comes to the worst, they may even go to war. But we have to stop that. We have to stop that by dealing with everybody even-handedly. And even-handedly dealing means that there are permanent friends, there are permanent interests, but friends can always be less permanent sometimes.
You were an ambassador, a bridge builder, and you have been creating connections among nations. And this Horn of Africa is very much a volatile area. When these two big superpowers just perched on this area, what is your recommendation for these powers, even for countries in the Horn of Africa, to take care of the situation?
The key to sustain our independence, the key to treat with the Western or Eastern countries on equal basis is to strengthen our regional organizations, like the African Union, which was African Organization of African Unity before, IGAD, COMESA. All these regional entities should be, which are genuinely African, should be strengthened. We have to make them relevant through our own participation vigorously. So the key to maintaining our independence is to strengthen our own African identity, African economics activities, and African peace and security arrangements.
Some commentators are comparing what happened in 1979 in the US-Iran relationship, in the Ethio-US relationship. Ambassador, are you concerned that history will repeat itself?
Well, history usually repeats itself, but I'm positive that with the current technological, economic, and other developments, the trajectory can be different. Well, the Americans are still dealing with Iran, because Iran has proven to itself that it can manage to build its own rockets, to develop its own nuclear power. All this has gained it the respect of the West, and they have sat down to negotiate. And if Iran was subduing to the Western diktats, this wouldn't have happened. If Russia has not improved its military capacities from time to time, then it would have been trampled by the West. If China simply stayed in the most backward situations that it was at one time, China would be, a playground for West and others. So any country, any region has to strengthen itself first, make itself relevant, and then see that it can deal with the others. Foreign policy is a reflection of your internal strength, nothing else. Foreign policy can be strong only when you are internally strong. Nobody will play the fiddle for you. You have to do it yourself.
Recently, Ambassador Feltman, specially envoy for the Horn of Africa for the Biden administration, is replaced by another diplomat. Do you think that will bring any kind of change in the Ethio-American relationship?
Let's hope, but I don't think it will bring anything unless we, on our part, also make sure that we are well represented wherever we are in any Western country. That is very important. We have to also look at ourselves. And our foreign policy should also look at the fact that now the Americans have changed gear. They have shifted. What do we do? So we have to also think in terms of improving our own stature, in terms of improving our own approach. That's it. You don't blame only the Americans for whatever they are doing because it is their interest. We have to blame ourselves for not doing what our interest wishes.
You have been serving this country for a very long time, and you have been an ambassador, a bridge builder, I would like to call it. And what are the most important points that the Biden administration should change in order to have this long-standing relationship to be preserved for years to come?
It is not up to me to advise the Biden administration. But what the Biden administration should do is live by the Charter of the United Nations all countries have signed. Live by the Charter of International Human Rights Declarations, humanitarian laws. If they do that, then we are good partners. Because we in Ethiopia believe that we are living by the Charter of the United Nations. We respect the rules, international rules. We don't negate international rules. We don't take any hegemonistic attitude towards any country. And as long as we believe in the equality of nations, big or small, then the world is the better. And so this is the advice I could give if they listen.
We have to end it here. Ambassador Tafara Shaul, I thank you very much for your enlightening views.
Thank you for having me.
You are watching The Messenger. I am Johannes Lijalam. Thank you for watching.